Welcome in, everybody. We'll get started here in just a few minutes. Alrighty, guys. Welcome back to the Sleuth Intuition channel. I'm your host, Patrick Vallejos, broadcasting to the world live from Phoenix, Arizona. Hope you guys are enjoying your Saturday morning. For me, everything so far so good. I had my morning walk, had breakfast, and 2 cups of coffee. 2 small cups. Welcome back, Funkarella. See, who do we have here? Rescue, it's good to see you. Zoe, Rob. Always good to see you, Rob. Rebecca, Christine, Doris, Cindy, Tambi, Audra, Beth, how are you? Audrey, Jill, Doris, Sensei, good to see you, Sensei.
We do not train to be merciful here. Mercy is for the weak. Here, on the street, in competition.
Go ahead and hit you with that, Sensei. She Warrior, welcome. Pitbull. 12 Cats, good morning. Jill says, working on my small cup of coffee. Okay, today we discuss the Abby and Libby case out of Delphi, also known as the Delphi murders. It's been making headlines here throughout the week. Well, actually, throughout the last 3 years, really. Since the arrest of Richard Allen. And one thing we haven't really heard a whole lot about, if at all, is the DNA. We've heard Doug Carter talk about it. We've heard all of the lead investigators talk about DNA. So I'm not quite sure. We haven't heard anything from the defense. And you would think if the DNA didn't match, or if they didn't have any DNA on Richard Allen, that would be a major focal point. And if the defense had DNA that did match, you think that they would want to include that. But also, with every investigation, you have to be real cautious of the wording that investigators use when they're speaking to media and reporters, right? They say, "Did you find, do you have DNA?" Well, yeah, there's DNA on everything. Wherever you're sitting right now, you're leaving your DNA all over the place. So just because they tell us, "Oh, yeah, we have DNA," well, of course they have DNA. Wherever you have people, you're going to have DNA. And I don't know if you guys remember this. Let me share my screen real quick.
I asked him about fingerprints.
There were some fingerprints collected.
Do you know if those fingerprints belong to the killer?
Right? Fingerprints, of course. There's going to be fingerprints all over the place. They could be the victim's fingerprints. They could be the victim's family members' fingerprints. Anybody that picked up a jacket or touched a cell phone or shared lip gloss, there's going to be fingerprints.
That I do not know.
And same with DNA. You have DNA.
Yes.
Do you have his DNA?
Yeah, we don't know.
Okay. And another question is, if they don't know whose DNA it is, why don't they have Richard Allen's DNA? Because if they did, we'd know about it, right? Good to see you, Big Bird. How are you? Farmer, welcome on in. Shout out to my mods. You guys work hard. I appreciate everything you do. Lemon ginger tea. That sounds yummy. Good luck with your cold. Think that'll do the trick for you. MF, welcome in. Bootleg Pass, how are you? Do you have a problem, Mr. Lawrence? Hey, it's that guy that kicked my ass. No worries, Audra. So, what do you guys think? I think we're going to talk mainly about DNA, but I also want to talk about the recent filings from the defense team confirming. Well, to me, it was pretty much just a rumor. I wasn't certain that it was that these words were provided to investigators the way we were hearing it. But with the Keegan Klein stuff and him literally telling investigators that his father may be responsible for the murders, I mean, that doesn't make any sense. So we can kind of we'll talk about those two items. Good to see you, Molly. Thank you for that. I agree. Good morning, CJK. Right. They have fingerprints and DNA. Carter told us, let me see exactly how he worded it. Let's see. It's a small part of an article here. This is from pretty early on. that's the one I wanted. Indiana State Police Superintendent Doug Carter says they have several pieces and parts, but they are looking for the one piece of evidence that will crack the case, right? And that one piece we now know is the gun. They need it to match with the bullet. That's the only reason Richard Allen is in custody. They've served dozens of search warrants. They served a search warrant on Richard Allen because, according to them, they found a lost tip. And now they were able to serve that search warrant, even though all the information that they had on Richard Allen was exactly what they had from day 2. But this is in quotation marks, quoting Doug Carter. I know that we have a human element, right? What is that? That sounds like DNA to me. And then we have a very solid science element, which is the bullet. We are using every capable process that we have from a scientific perspective, as everyone would expect us to, and we will continue to do that until there is nothing left to do. After that, the question is, forgive me, does that include DNA? Doug Carter says, yes, it does. We have not ruled out the possibility that this is a local person. Every time we clear somebody, it gets us closer. We are confident that somewhere in the tips we have valuable information, and every time we can eliminate one, we can move on to the next. So think how crazy it is that you have a man who came forward, said, I was there at the time the girls disappeared, and yet they don't have his DNA. They haven't served a search warrant on this man. And there probably was only 4 other men matching the description of the bridge guy who were there in that time frame, within that window. Yet why didn't they have Richard Allen's DNA? I mean, they're going to have to answer for that. And why are they taking DNA? Are they hoping for a match? With Daniel Nations, that's the first thing they said is, hey, we took his DNA, but they cleared him. They didn't say they cleared him because of the DNA. They said they cleared him because of an alibi, that he couldn't have been there when the crime took place. Good to see you, Anna. Good to see you, Audrey. Lulu, good morning. CJK says, it's my understanding they have some type of DNA. Well, every crime scene is going to have DNA. So, I mean, why do they have unknown DNA? I think is probably a better question. Everybody that was around Abby and Libby, they were questioned and they had to provide a DNA sample. So if they have DNA and they're hoping to compare it to someone else, why do they have unknown DNA? Why do they have unknown fingerprints? And why is the defense not talking about that? Wouldn't that help them with their whole third-party suspect approach? Like, look, they have DNA that they've been telling us that belonged to the killer, and it does not match our client. And if it does match, why wasn't that provided in the probable cause affidavit, or at least talked about or touched on at all? Farmer says, is that DNA human? Well, right here, Doug Carter says we have a human element, which has to be the DNA or fingerprints or both, touch DNA. And then we have a very solid science element. Now, the science element is 100% the unspent bullet casing. And he's referring to forensic science. Audra says the problem is they have everyone and their brother out there wandering around the crime scene for hours. There were hundreds of people walking around, but not touching the bodies or even walking really near the girls. There was only a handful of people. And I think that was Pat Brown who discovered the bodies. I think he may have gone up to the girls possibly and just to check. Yeah, welcome in, Bootleg. Two blood drops were found in a shed at the south end of the bridge. They contained DNA of both victims. Unknown male DNA. Yeah, when you show that to me, then I'll believe it. Hey, what's up, Pathers? No, you're not late at all. We're just getting started. Anna says the Ron Logan affidavit for the search seemed to search for animal hairs. I don't think animal hairs were mentioned one time in that affidavit. From what I remember. I just don't think they're going to search all the trees and the branches and all that. They're going to search the victims and their clothing and their body and things like that. They're not going to walk up and down the trail trying to find DNA. I mean, they're going to look for blood. They're going to search for what they can, but they're not going to be picking up random areas and hoping for DNA. Anna says KK's dog was allegedly taken to a vet for a blood draw. See, I just feel like we're taking rumors and we're inflating them. We had a neighbor that said they took Tony Klein's dog into custody. Now, as far as the vet for blood and all of that, that's never happened. So we have to stop giving weight to things that we can't prove. Now, I spoke to the neighbor. Remember, he was going to come on the show. We have him lined up as a guest, and then right at the last minute, he backed out. But I talked to him. He told me yes, they took his dog. Now, they're not going to let a pit bull run around while they're investigating a crime scene or potentially serving a search warrant. So I just feel like, of course, they would take the dog and secure it. But to add that they were pulling blood and all that kind of stuff, we need to cool it with that. Unless we can prove it. Good to see you, Boston. Yeah, so I don't think that they have the killer's DNA. If they did, the defense would be all over it, saying they have the killer's DNA and it doesn't match Richard Allen. And the prosecution would say we have DNA and it does match Richard Allen. But I think another question is, why do they have unknown DNA? We learned early on that all the friends and anybody that had come in contact with Abby or Libby, they were all tested fingerprints, DNA, everything. What's up, Caricature?
Looking into whether a rape suspect who killed himself is responsible for the deaths of 2 Indiana girls. Paul Etter committed suicide last month during a standoff in Boone County, Indiana. Investigators are requesting DNA testing. Police had received tips about Etter in their investigation into the murders of Libby German and Abby Williams. The girls were killed more than 2 years ago while on a hiking trail in Delphi, Indiana. In April, police released an updated sketch of the suspect along with a short video from Libby's cell phone showing a man walking across an abandoned railroad bridge near them.
Okay, so their DNA, they're taking a DNA test from all of these folks that they're questioning. So I think it's safe to say that they do have DNA, but it's unknown. So why is it unknown? And if it's unknown and it doesn't belong to Richard Allen, why is the prosecution not talking about it? I believe that that would be huge for them. So I'm hoping somebody out there can help me understand that. What's up, Mesra? Tam B says, did I hear one time about animal DNA? I may be off base, but I think I heard that. Well, what it is it's bits and pieces of information that fuel rumors. Like Doug Carter saying we have a human element and a science element, right? And then we have them taking Tony Klein's dog into custody, which I think is normal. They're not going to let this dog run around. So I think we're putting those things together and inflating it. And now that we know about the bullet, that's the science element. That tells me that Doug's not talking about animal hair or anything like that. He's talking about the unspent bullet. Yeah, that's a big what if, Molly. Allegedly, the DNA is touch DNA. That's what I've heard. On the shoulder of Libby's jacket. And why is it unknown? If it doesn't belong to Richard Allen, why don't they know who it belongs to? Remember Daniel Nations? They took everybody's DNA. But we never heard anybody say, oh, well, they're cleared because of the DNA. They didn't clear Nations because of DNA. They cleared him because of his alibi. CJK, the defense has nothing, so they are throwing mud at the wall to see what sticks in the way of a defense for their guilty client. Well, what I'm saying is if they don't know who this person is and they don't know who this DNA belongs to, how effective has it been that they're been taking all this DNA this entire time from everybody? And can you wash DNA? Can you contaminate it? And if it's contaminated, why do they need samples if they have nothing to compare it to? Hey, She Warrior. Human element. Yeah, to me, that's the DNA, which sounds like touch DNA. And if that doesn't belong to Richard Allen, who does it belong to? And if Richard Allen is a lone killer, why isn't his DNA all over the crime scene? I mean, is that what's going on here? You know, this is all Libby's clothing. Is that why we see? Is that what he was doing for an hour and 45 minutes? Moving, staging, and cleaning his DNA? Now, to me, it's obvious that he targeted Libby, and we hear him apologizing for what happened to Abby. We don't quite know why. But why is there no remorse for what happened with Libby? And why do we see all of her clothing in the water? I don't think that he's going to bring her out into the open. If you're going to see anything from that bridge, it's going to be out there in the water. And if you're going to hear anything, it's going to be through that little ravine. So why do we have unknown DNA with everybody that's been tested? And why don't we have Richard Allen's DNA? And I don't know of anybody who is an opportunistic killer who is taking the time to clean off DNA in a creek. That's something that serial killers do. Here, I got an article for you here. Speaking of serial killers. So this is from CBS News. It was put out January 4th of 2011 out of New York. They are startling revelations from a brutal killer. The man behind more than a dozen murders in New York is offering his take on last month's gruesome beach discovery on Long Island. CBS 2's Mary Calvi spoke exclusively with Joel Rifkin about his killing spree and about what could be a new serial killer in our area. They're talking about Lisk. Certain things are very hard to stop, Rifkin said recently. Like addiction to murder. Rifkin terrorized the city over a 4-year span, killing one woman after another with his bare hands. Rifkin was finally stopped by police on a routine traffic stop when a Long Island officer noticed his front license plate was missing. An odor in Rifkin's truck led to the discovery of a body. Rifkin confessed to all 17 killings. You think of people as things, Rifkin said. And now a new killer may be following in his murderous footsteps. A little graveyard was found by the beach off Ocean Parkway on Long Island last month, the final resting place of 4 women. It was a scene eerily similar to a case 4 years ago just outside Atlantic City. Just a mile from the beach in a drainage ditch, 4 women are found dead, strangled to death. 4 women were murdered in Atlantic City and 4 women were murdered on Long Island, 4 years apart and all unsolved. Could crimes of the past offer a clue? The year was 1990. The murderous rampage of notorious Long Island serial killer Rifkin came to an end. In maximum security prison for 16 years now, Rifkin spoke with Calvi in detail about his killing spree. 17 prostitutes. Drug-addicted, D's-carrying vermin is the lie I told myself, Rifkin said. Unlike the groups of 4 discovered on Long Island and in Atlantic City, Rifkin said he disposed of the bodies in 3s. There were mini clusters, little sets of 3, Rifkin said. 3 were dismembered, 3 were in oil drums, some were in water, some were on land. It's like my own little nightmare scenarios. Rifkin painstakingly covered up his crimes in 3s. He researched past crimes for details. Water is harder to investigate than land because it washes everything, Rifkin said. The killer in Atlantic City may have known that as well. The victims were discovered face down in several inches of water. Key evidence was washed away. Rifkin added, that's no coincidence. There's a guy in Atlantic City that they were all pointing at this casino. And again, it was 4 women in one location, Rifkin said. Since there's 4 in one place, he's probably comfortable with the area. Calvi, would you have killed again if you weren't caught? Rifkin, as much as I say I wanted to stop, there probably would have been others. Rifkin's victims were nearly invisible to society. They're easy because they travel a lot. They can disappear for months, he said. Calvi, what about the women you killed? Was there a thought about the lives that you took, the families that were ruined? Rifkin says, you lie to yourself. You deny that there's a family. You deny that there's parents and possibly kids. You think of people as things. Throughout his trial and incarceration, Rifkin still could not explain one thing. Why? He says, I don't know. Why do people try to quit smoking for their entire lives? Rifkin said. As much as I say I wanted to stop, there probably would have been others. The court sentenced Rifkin to more than 200 years in prison, making any chance of parole impossible. Sorry, guys. Looks like I have a bad USB cable. So looks like my camera is not going to be on for the remainder. No biggie. If Richard Allen's DNA is not on the bodies or immediate scene, but unknown DNA is, how can they arrest him? Well, because there's DNA at every scene. You have DNA right now. Wherever you're sitting, there's DNA. All over your home, there's DNA. If you've had a visitor who came and put his finger on your doorbell, it's now covered in touch DNA. So just because you have unknown DNA doesn't mean it's the killer's DNA. But don't you find it strange that you have the target, who I believe was Libby, and she was the one that was nude. You have Richard Allen apologizing about what happened to Abby. And then you find Libby's clothes in the water. And then we have an hour and 45 minutes that the killer is there from the point that he abducted the girls off of the bridge to where he's seen, if that's him, right, walking muddy on the street, appearing to have gotten into a fight. That's an hour and 45 minutes. That's a long time. Is that what he was doing? Rifkin says that the Long Island serial killer victims are found near water for a reason. Is that what was down the hill? The creek? We think about the private drive. Well, maybe this was an attempted abduction. Or maybe he was trying to take them near the Weber residence. But something else that's down the hill is a water source. And we found, let me pull this photo back up. Is that what he was doing? That's what Rifkin tells us. He said he studied other crimes and other killers. And if that's true, we're definitely dealing with a pre-planned crime. And when you pre-plan a crime, you usually know your victims. And we know the girls potentially were lured there, right, by an Anthony Schatz. So does that put the whole Keegan Klein back in play? We're not talking about premeditation. We're talking about pre-planning. Rifkin says, well, if he's leaving clusters there, he's most likely comfortable and familiar with the area. We know that to be true about Richard Allen. For all we know, he's practiced crossing that creek. Like, I'll walk right through that water. I just don't see him forcing the girls to disrobe here. Doesn't make any sense. It would be at that point he is running the greatest risk of being caught. It's one thing to be seen walking with two young girls through the woods. It's another to be walking with them and one is naked. That's going to set off all kinds of alarms. Here, I pulled two other articles here. DNA evidence discovered at the scene where two Indiana teens were found murdered. Now top priority. Look at the date on this. It's 2 days after the first presser. Nobody served a search warrant on Richard Allen, and they don't have his DNA. As if it would matter. They took all this DNA, and they have their prime suspect, and the DNA doesn't even seem to be in play. I think that that's a big deal. Investigators say they discovered DNA evidence at the crime scene where two Indiana teenagers were found murdered last week. The evidence now has top priority for processing by investigators, Fox 59 reports. It's a strong lead in a case where authorities have been clamoring for any clue about the suspect who murdered 13-year-old Abby Williams and 14-year-old Libby German. In an attempt to identify the possible murder suspect, investigators previously released a grainy suspect photo, a chilling audio of a man's voice saying "down the hill," and now a DNA sample. We asked for a fast track as far as that piece of information, said Carroll County Sheriff Tobe Lesenby. So I can't go into specifics because of the ongoing investigation. And what I'm knowing when they say we can't go into specifics, it's because they don't know. They don't want to give you a negative answer. I can't comment. I don't want to jeopardize the investigation. But what they really mean is we don't know. Right? Police haven't said specifically what kind of evidence they recovered. Investigators believe the girls met the suspect in a chance encounter, or the person knew they were going to be there. Right? There's no other options. Those are the only two options. So it's not like they've narrowed anything down. These are just words that they use to kind of get through the conversation. Right? What other option is there? The girls met the suspect in a chance encounter, or the person knew that they were going to be there. Well, if you don't have DNA and you have what appears to be the target's clothing in the creek, isn't it safe to say that this was a pre-planned crime? They were brought down to the creek because of the water source. And after he committed what he was most likely fantasizing about, he's in the creek cleaning off the DNA. Because from what we've recently have heard, both girls were taken across the creek before they were attacked. Right? Now, why do that if you didn't plan it that way? Why not just attack them on the south end of the bridge or directly under the bridge? The bodies were discovered along the edge of Deer Creek in Delphi, which is about a half mile away from the Monon High Bridge, an abandoned rail bridge over Deer Creek that was the last place the two girls were seen. They were supposed to meet with family members later Monday evening, But when the teens didn't show up, their families called police. Officials are asking anyone who may have taken pictures in the area or was just on the trail to contact authorities immediately. Right? Richard Allen. All right, you guys hold that thought. I'll be right back. Alrighty, guys, I'm back. Okay, before I go into the next article, well, there was a couple people. We know that Pat Brown may have gone up and checked if they had a pulse or anything like that. I'm not quite sure. I know that he was the one that discovered the girls. Hey, there's which with DNA they can tell if it's male or female, as well as a few other elements. But definitely without a correct sample or ancestral, it's hard to make a match. I don't think they ever said animal hairs. If you can show it to me, shoot me an email, but I don't remember them ever mentioning animal hair. Yeah, and I've seen no proof of that bootleg about anything being found in any outbuildings or anything like that. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I'm not going to help spread those kind of rumors. We've got plenty of rumors we're dealing with right now. What's up, Frank? Hey, Shadow. Molly, Sleuth Intuition, what do you think about the DNA? Do you think they have Richard Allen's DNA? No, I don't. Because if they did, I don't think we would be where we are now. That would have been made public. I mean, that's the smoking gun. There's no arguing at that point. It's not right now. The narrative is we know you were there because we found your bullet, and you admitted to being on the trails at the time. So not only do we know that you were there at the trails at that time the girls disappeared, but now we can connect you to the crime scene. That wouldn't be the story. The story would be we have his DNA. You know, that's it. You never would have heard the term Odinist. You never would have heard any of that. It would have just been closed case. Cindy says the lack of the defense bringing up the DNA leads me to believe it is a partial match. As you have mentioned before, I no longer believe that, Cindy. I don't think they have any DNA. I think they have an unknown DNA source, which could be anybody that they haven't tested. They didn't test Richard Allen's DNA. They told us that they tested everybody's DNA that came in contact with Abby and Libby. We don't know how thorough that was. That's your local news feed. Hey, what's up, Shay? Good to see you. Well, we definitely heard Tobe say that we do have fingerprints and we do have DNA. And if it belonged to Richard Allen, we would know that by now. We can pull up the Ron Logan affidavit because I don't remember that. You say it's labeled 1. Yeah, this affidavit also says in the first line here, approximately 1 p.m. It was not approximately 1 p.m. If anything, it was approximately 2. We now know it was 1:49, 1:45. So whoever wrote this, they were missing a lot of pieces. But if you can tell me where to find where it says animal hair, I'm happy to put it up here on the screen. Wounds were caused by a sharp weapon. Oh, I just got your email. Let me take a look. That's not the affidavit, though. I don't know what this is. I don't know what you're sending me, Anna. It's not titled, and it's not, definitely doesn't look like this affidavit here. Logan owns farmland and cares for large farm animals. Says right here, during the processing of the crime scene, investigators located unknown fibers and unidentified hairs, which may later be used for comparison of similar fibers or hairs. Doesn't say anything about animal. All right, let's go to Article 2. Lead detective in Delphi murders confirms police have more audio from phone and DNA evidence. 6 months into the search for a killer of Abby Williams and Libby German, we are learning new information about the evidence police are using to track down the suspect. Takes a lot of time. We want to be very thorough and make sure that all I's are dotted and T's crossed. This is a tough case, said ISP First Sergeant Jerry Holman. It is a case the ISP Lafayette District Investigative Commander has worked every day for the past 6 months. We are getting closer every day. Well, really, they were getting further away. I know that it's cliche, but we are, said Sergeant Holman. Dozens of state, local, and federal agencies are still working around the clock to track down the man they believe killed Abby and Libby while the girls were out on a walk on the Delphi Historic Trails in February. We are stronger than ever, and we are getting more people involved. So I think that the time is coming, said Holman. Police tell us they have conducted hundreds of interviews, followed up on thousands of leads, and served dozens of search warrants to find clues that the killer may have left behind, including DNA. At every crime scene, you are going to have DNA. We are still working on identifying all of the DNA that we have there, which they haven't done. They still have unknown DNA. I just don't understand how that's possible. Who came in contact with the girls that has yet to be identified? I think that's a good question. Along with DNA evidence, police also have the suspect's voice. Police tell us Libby recorded the killer's voice on her phone, telling the girls, go down the hill. Investigators say she hit record after he approached them near the Monon High Bridge. Holman tells us investigators have more audio from Libby's phone, which was found with the girls at the crime scene. I wonder what's going on with that audio. I wonder if that's even going to be, if they go to court or trial, I wonder if that'll be presented. It does not appear to be anything more than some discussion between the girls. We have only released a portion of it. There are some others we think could help us, but again, protecting the integrity of the investigation is key, so we cannot release everything. So I think they're talking about the gun part, right? They referred to it as a science element, and they kept it out of the recording and possibly even blurred it out of the image. Thank you, Joey. Thank you for sponsoring today's live stream. I appreciate that. V says, could it be family members here? Could they be protecting an informant? I don't know. I figure they tested everybody. I guarantee they tested all the family members. Just one second. My wife is texting me. Yeah, I think everybody from the immediate family would have been tested. But unknown hairs and fibers could be animal hair. We know that they did dig up the cat. Well, at least I think they did. And that could be why they took Tony Klein's dog. We just don't know that for sure. That's all I'm saying about that. Good to see you, Phil Bond. Welcome in. Wouldn't Richard Allen's DNA be on the unspent bullet? Maybe, maybe not. And if it isn't, to me, that's another sign that this was a pre-planned crime. You know, maybe he wore gloves or loaded these bullets in under his T-shirt. You know, a lot of criminals do. They will do that. Anna says the problem with touch DNA might be a random touch. Yeah, it's got to be something random, right? Like somebody that they haven't tested. The jacket was an extra from the backseat of Sister Kelsey's vehicle. Yeah, it could be anybody. But you think that they would be like, all right, Kelsey, who came in contact with this jacket? But really, it could be anybody from her school. It just sucks that they've been leaning on that DNA and trying to compare all these suspects, and they don't even have DNA linking their prime suspect, Richard Allen. I don't know. That's just a frustrating thought. Good to see you, Joey. Couldn't any DNA be sent to Othram for a family profile, familiar match tracing? I don't think it's human DNA they are talking about. Well, Kim Riley said it's like this person hasn't committed a crime before. How would you know that if you didn't run their DNA the way that you're referring to, Cindy? And they can't do that with animals. Anna says this crime was sloppy. Even a first-time killer is likely to wash blood off his hands. Yeah, but we're not talking about washing blood off his hands. We're talking about him taking the time to get his DNA off of the clothing potentially, right? To me, that's why it's sitting there in that creek. The new information that we just heard tells us that he took those girls across the creek, then assaulted them and murdered them. So why is he walking back to the water and we have clothing in there? It's my opinion that he's cleaning the DNA off. If this is an opportunistic killer, he's not going to do that because he's already so panicked. There's a million other things that he hasn't considered. He didn't go to the trails, right, to do that. That would be the opportunistic killer. I went to the trails to cool my head off, and then something came over me that I could not control. I was consumed. And then I panicked. Like the Carly Bruscia case. You have a gentleman leaving his job on the way home, sees a young girl. He doesn't even change. He doesn't even take off his name tag. He's clearly caught on CCTV footage kidnapping this girl. That is opportunistic, and he was quickly caught. Whoever committed these murders used an area that they were familiar with, and it appears to be that they pre-planned it and used that creek to get rid of their DNA. That's the only reason they're not talking about it. I mean, that should be huge news, right? The defense should be all over that. Richard Allen's DNA is nowhere to be found. Okay. If the killer took the girls across the creek and murdered them on the other side, why are the clothes in the creek? Why take the time to put them in the creek? Because you were scrubbing them. Hey, Jill, good to see you. All right. Looks like I pulled another piece of an article here. Let's go through this information. This is out of Fort Wayne. Police investigating the murders of two teen girls from Delphi have found DNA supposedly belonging to the girls' killer. Supposedly. It's been 6 months since Abby Williams and Libby German were murdered while walking on a hiking trail near Delphi. And now the Indiana State Police says they not only have more audio of the killer's voice recovered from Libby's cell phone, but also DNA evidence that they believe belongs to the killer. And if they don't have Richard Allen's DNA, that means that it's because he designed it that way. And if we can learn anything from what Joel Rifkin is telling us, the fact that the girls were found near a water source is not by accident. And if we're to believe the recent information, we know that the girls were attacked and murdered on that side of the creek, not in multiple places. So why is Libby's clothing found in the water? Well, if you pay attention to Joel, it's because the killer is getting rid of his evidence, his DNA. And that's not something common with an opportunistic killer. It's just not. And if it is, you got my email address. Show it to me. I love statistics. Show me one case that's happened. I'm not talking about the killer washing his hands. Everybody's going to wash blood off their hands. You can't go home to your family if you got blood all over your hands. I'm talking about the victim's clothing. Welcome in, Darlene. Yeah, I think they did mention that in the Franks. And they didn't spend much time on it, Hathers. That's what I'm referring to. Why is nobody talking about that? Why is it not good for the prosecution, but also not good for the defense? We know that the prosecution isn't going to bring up a lot of things because they're waiting for trial. And we know the defense is just notorious for leaking everything. So we'll catch up on chat on the DNA, and then we'll get into the revelation that was recently released and some court filings from the defense. Yep, time of death is a big question too. My understanding between 2:30 and 3:30. But I'm not sure. Yeah, why is he only apologizing for Abby? And why is Libby the one that was disrobed and her clothing appears to be the only clothing that had his DNA on it? Why else would he be washing it in the creek? Right? And if he's pre-planning this murder, I need to lure the girls there. How are you going to do that? Online. That's where Anthony Shots comes in, right? Well, why go down the hill? Well, that way I can hide my DNA. We have somebody who killed 17 people telling us that it's not a coincidence that bodies are found near water. And in this case, we actually have the victim's clothing in water. And we now know that they had already crossed the creek before they were killed. So if they've already crossed the creek and were killed, why is the clothing in the water? And why is the killer staying with his victims for an hour and 45 minutes? I mean, it's possible that it just occurred to him like, okay, my DNA is all over this clothing. I need to scrub it in the water without it being pre-planned. I mean, that is possible. I just don't think it's likely. I don't think somebody that has gone to this trail for the purposes of just taking a walk and for whatever reason, through compulsion or whatever, attacks these girls and has the wherewithal to scrub the victim's clothing. I don't see it. To me, it has pre-planned written all over it. Hey, Stingy, what's up? The good old sofa nap. Hey, Cheeks, how you doing? Cheeks says, why hasn't the defense commented on the video of the bridge? They like to talk about third-party suspects and other evidence like the bullet, but why not something as prime as the video? It's a good question. What about the audio? The video and audio? And what's going... I don't know a whole lot about Snapchat, but when you upload a video to Snapchat, does it have audio? So how do they have a video from Snapchat and then audio from the phone? Just curious. I could be wrong about that. Joey says the list killer killed the 4 Atlantic City victims. I agree. I think that is true. We've covered that too. Probably has more than that too. Because all 4 of those victims in Atlantic City were facing towards Gilgo Beach. 4 years later, they found 4 more victims that they've now tied to Rex Heuermann. So I agree with you, Joey. T Lemon, let's all support Ricky by believing him when he says he did it. But he was under induced psychosis when he said that, right? Which is possible. It's just my opinion. If they don't have his DNA at the crime scene, it's because he took steps to ensure that. And that tells me that he pre-planned this. And if he pre-planned this, how did he get the girls to the bridge? You don't pre-plan a murder and then sit around waiting for somebody to cross that bridge. You pre-plan it and you lure them across that bridge. Suede, welcome in. Other actors we know were there. They get away. I bet they have box cutters in the junk drawer. Don't we all? Question is, do you have a box cutter with a serrated blade? Maybe that's what they found at Richard Allen's home. Or somewhere, right? Maybe in the vehicle. Yep, that's true, Joey. There's a lot of false confessions. It's really weird the things that people do, but that's true. You have coerced confessions under duress. Homie, don't play that. What's up? It says, I don't think they have DNA. I'm pretty sure that they don't. I mean, they have DNA, but I don't think they have the killer's DNA because I think he washed it off in the creek or the crick. Sleuth Intuition, were there 2 Ron Logan search warrants? I'm foggy. Well, the first one wasn't a search warrant. It was a what's the word? I'm having a brain fart. I don't want to say probation. So Ron Logan was on probation, so they don't need a search warrant to search his home. They just need a search warrant to search the outbuildings. What do you mean, Joey? Hey, Yankee, what's up? How you doing? Lulu says, what about Brad Holder's son? Yeah, you think they would have taken DNA from them, but you don't want to assume, right? But if they took DNA from his father, they would know that the killer was related to him if it belonged to Logan. I'm pretty sure they can prove that Logan was at school. Brad Holder's alibi is a little bit iffy, but I mean, I doubt somebody that's going to commit a murder is going to get off work, speed down, join a murder that's already happening, and then go work out at the gym. I mean, if you believe that, I got some oceanfront property to sell you here in Arizona. Now, could he have lied about his alibi or somehow forged the timesheet? That's possible. Just depends on the company and how you clock in. I don't know if he had a punch card or whatever. But with some companies, you can fill out your own time card. Hey, Misty, welcome in. Good to see you. Lulu, he was allegedly dating Abby. Well, it's been pretty much verified that he, in fact, was dating her. We have photographs with them together. He admitted it, I believe, and he also went to her funeral. Him and Brad Holder. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they have him in school as well. Oh, we got a scrub report. Don't forget to hit that like button. And also, when we're done, don't forget to share the video. Yeah, it's got to be that, Anna. It's got to be that. Some random touch DNA that they haven't been able to identify. I don't know, Big Bird. I don't know if this is a capital murder case. I'm very confused by the charges. So the death penalty may not be on the table. I'm not sure. And they definitely want to charge him with what they know can stick and what they can prove, which is that he is the guy on the bridge. that he did kidnap them off the bridge and that they were murdered shortly after. So without him doing what he did, they would still be alive, which makes him responsible for murder and kidnapping. But capital murder, I don't know. I hope so, because that would give them a huge bargaining chip. Carol says, was anybody sexually assaulted? That I don't know. That I don't know. But covering cases like this, one thing that we have learned, Richard Allen can be paraphilic, right? He gets off on committing the murder, and then maybe even after they're deceased, he's secreting, and that's what he's cleaning off. As disgusting as it sounds, that could be what we're dealing with. Hey, Beth, how you doing? Wouldn't the defense have concrete third-party defense if unknown DNA was found, not matching to Richard Allen? Has the defense mentioned that? And that might be why they're not mentioning it, because there is no match. You know, the same way there's no match for the prosecution suspect, there's no match for their suspect. So the same way it's not helping the prosecution, it's not helping the defense. So they're staying quiet on it. Possibly, right? Patricia says animal hair was mentioned in the second search warrant for Ron Logan. That's what I hear. I have everything on Ron Logan. We can pull it back up. Let's take a look. I don't know if there is a second search warrant for Ron Logan. There's a lot of documents and stuff submitted by the investigators. Swade Smith says, was DG still in the meth game February 2017? No. It looks like he was all finished with that in 2014. And he may have been cooperating with law enforcement. That's why everybody thinks this could be a revenge, right? But that's all surface stuff. People don't take the time to do any research or their own digging. Just like with Evansdale, they found out that two of the parents had drug charges, right? So it's a revenge, and it's the Mexican cartel. It's just not realistic, guys. Does it happen? Yes. I just don't see somebody who's terrified of spending life in prison who's facing drug charges from a snitch, putting their entire future in jeopardy. But it could be. Criminals are stupid. That's why they do what they do. Welcome in, Carol Harrison. Bloodletting is totally different game. What are you referring to? How is that relevant? That's a good question, Big Bird. I don't know. I don't know if it is. I don't know if it's considered a capital murder case. Thank you for that, Patricia. That looks like the first one. I don't think Nicole Robinson did both of those search warrants. But yeah, I mean, they may have been taking animal hair samples from Ron Logan to match them to hair and fibers found at the crime scene. And I'm assuming that if they did do that, it's because he had a whole lot of animals. But as far as them finding animal hair at the crime scene, I still haven't seen where they've clearly stated that. From what I understand, it's unknown hair and fibers. Which is very similar to DNA, right? We know Libby had animals. We know that anybody who sat in Kelsey's car who had an animal could be a secondary transfer. So just like the DNA, I'm just not sure if they connected that to anybody, or it's as if they weren't able to connect a lot of things that might not even be relevant. Anna, the recent information that was released is that the girls were attacked after they crossed the creek. I think that's been cleared up now. And all of the investigators that I've spoken to privately tell me that the crime scenes, that's the story that they tell. The photographs tell that very story. And I haven't spoken on that because they asked me not to, but now that it's been made public, I can say that. But even they believe that what they're seeing in the crime scene photos tells them a story that they crossed while dressed and then were undressed. Yeah, more rumors, Anna. And I'll show you where that came from. It's because when they searched his home and they put some of the photographs and evidence, there was this orange cleaner. And I'll show that to you right now. But there's nothing that says it was found at the actual crime scene that I know of. And I'm not saying that anybody's wrong about anything. I'm just telling you what I know. But here's that photograph. So that's where this rumor comes from. This is what happens. People get access to information that's not really made public, and they think they have all the answers, right? Well, I know something that you don't know, so that means that I'm right. And that's a clear example of bias. And that goes for folks who are on the prosecution side and folks who are on the defense side. You know, you spend years and years digging and digging, and finally you find this information, right? Oh my God. This is what it's been all about. This is why we haven't had any answers. Because of my digging and my investigative work. And then they want to go on and say, oh, well, it was Ron Logan, or it was this, Keegan Klein wasn't involved, or it was Ron Logan because I have all the information that hasn't been made public. I mean, you can't find a clearer case of bias than that. Just because you don't know it doesn't mean that you're right? Just because the public isn't aware of the information that you have doesn't mean that that's answering all the questions. I've watched similar situations bring people down the complete wrong direction. You even have well-known journalists writing books about it and being completely wrong after the fact because they had all this unknown information and they did all this great investigative work and they got their hands on probable cause affidavits and case files and things like that, hey, I know what I'm talking about. I can't tell you about it, but just trust me. Just trust me. Well, none of that matters anymore because everything's pretty much public. Hey, what's up, Fig? I found it interesting that when Hennessy was on a live asking for donations, he stated the defense needed a DNA expert. That is interesting. What are your thoughts on the whole DNA situation? Looks like the defense doesn't find it helpful and the prosecution doesn't find it helpful. Why? What's up, Nerdy Cat? Prosecution is going to have much more evidence to present at trial that we don't know about. Yet I would be stupid of them to show all their cards. I agree with that. But they kind of already have. Their best piece of evidence is the bullet. I don't see them talking about the bullet and not talking about DNA. Especially when I believe 100% that would be your strongest piece of evidence. Yeah, we have a DNA match. And you don't need a match. All you need is something that does not exclude your suspect, which is just as powerful as having a fingerprint. Yeah, I try to explain that, Fig. The prosecution will not show their smoking guns before the trial. Well, when it comes to DNA, you would, right? Unless it's something special is going on, like it's not a match, but they can't exclude. Like we have maybe 25, 21 markers or something like that. So we know we can't say definitively that it's Richard Allen, but it's somebody that's related to him. You know, it's either a brother, a father, or something like that. I just feel like the DNA is definitely something that would be made public and would be something that has been discussed. Never have I seen a case where they had matching DNA that wasn't the first thing that they told to the public. Like, we have his DNA. There's no reason for the prosecutor to keep that quiet. There's not one reason to say, "Oh, by the way, we didn't want to tell you guys, but yeah, we have DNA." There's absolutely no reason. Now, for other things, like witnesses or supporting evidence, things like that. But stuff like the bullet and DNA, there's absolutely no reason for that to be made public. It's very damning, and you would want the help from the public with that information. That's something that would be made public right away, in my opinion. Stingy says the prosecution haven't leaked anything, just what they needed to prove their point in court, unlike the defense, and most of the defense leaks the debunked now. Fig says, I think in a video with Doug Carter, where he is standing outside of a brick wall, he says an animal element. No, I have that. I have the quote. We went over that. You must have came in a little bit late. I'll read it again. He says here, I know that we have a human element and we have a very solid science element. Now, to me, the human element, he's referring to the DNA or touch DNA, and the solid science element is the unspent bullet or fibers and things like that, right? Yeah, so the quote is human element and a very solid science element is the direct quote. What's up, blind squirrel? Feeding the ducks? Where do you get that from? Are there ducks there? Yeah, the state doesn't have to put everything in a probable cause affidavit, but in my opinion, if they had a DNA match, they would. There's absolutely no reason to keep that from the public. Not one reason. That's something that would get the public behind you quick, very quickly. And I think if they did have DNA, it would have moved things along a lot quicker than what we're dealing with now. We wouldn't be hearing about Odinism, and we wouldn't be hearing about any of that. And you definitely wouldn't have had the defense team putting in the first Frank's motion that was leaked that there's no DNA connecting Richard Allen. I just don't think that they would put that in there. Hey, welcome in, Crime Sleepers. I'm guessing the defense know there's more devastating evidence to come. They're not going to broadcast it. It's their job to get it thrown out. Yeah. And the prosecutor's not going to talk about it. But I think when it comes to DNA, that is something that you definitely talk about. I've never seen a case where they've withheld that. That is the piece of information that they would release. Like, we have the killer's DNA at the crime scene. That's what you tell the public. And then everybody says, oh, well, they got the killer. And then the killer makes a deal. But now we don't have that. We have Odinism. We have the defense saying that there is no DNA in the leaked Franks memo. But that's my opinion. Hey, what's up, Cindy? Yeah, there was a lot of weird rumors. Well, they had a lot of information that they've been working on, a lot of inside details about Ron Logan. They had his probable cause affidavit. They knew that he tried to falsify an alibi. So then they just started manipulating the facts, right? They still believe that Ron Logan is the man on the bridge. Thank you, Hathers. Yeah, guys, don't forget to hit the thumbs up if you could, and share the video when we're all finished here. Yeah, it's almost like CJK, that's the defense's job. It takes a certain kind of person to be a defense attorney. Hey, what's up, TJ? Oh, yeah. Puppy, oxygen tank, sprayers. Looks like the Carhartt jacket might have been the one that was right. Augie says the case is so frustrating, so many twists and turns. I can't wait for real answers. Oh, they're coming. Pretty sure the status hearing will be the beginning of a plea deal negotiation. That's why they're getting all this stuff out of the way beforehand. We had 3 days of hearings, and then we have kind of like the death rattle of the defense team. That way they can get a clear understanding and advise their client of what they can expect. And I feel like they're going to tell them, hey, like, you need to make a deal, and this is what you can expect, and this is what we're going to shoot for. Swade Smith says, damn egos. What do you mean by that? What's up, Glam Van? Thank you, Audra. Fig says, if Richard Allen did have an encounter with the girls right before the abduction, I wonder if someone influenced them to cross the bridge. Maybe bet them money they wouldn't. Or maybe he forced them there. Somebody lured them across that bridge, in my opinion. There's a reason that Libby wanted to go across that bridge, and she needed Abby to go with her. Now, if they're on that bridge halfway at 2:05 and Abby still hasn't crossed the bridge at 2:13, but Libby has, it's probably because she's struggling. She's very scared. She's taking her time. And you have Richard Allen possibly triggered by that. But then we have to ask the question, why is she feeling pressured to cross and do something that she's obviously terrified of? And I don't know if that has anything to do with this recent revelation. Now, I took this from a screenshot from Ruckus, who put up the documents. But I thought this was all rumor until just recently. So let's read this. Keegan Klein is the son of Jerry Anthony Klein. He has 22 years old in February. Now, remember, if they don't have Richard Allen's DNA, that means that the DNA that they took from Keegan and his father won't exclude them if they clean the DNA off of the clothing or whatever. 2017, he and Jerry Anthony Klein resided in Peru, Indiana, February 2017. Detective David Vito testified that Keegan Klein was communicating with Liberty German using a fake Snapchat account under the name Anthony Schatz in the days leading up to and on February 13th. The content of these messages is unknown. He further testified that Keegan Klein admitted to driving to Delphi, Indiana with his father, Jerry Anthony Klein, on February 13th, 2017, and that Keegan Klein waited in the vehicle while Jerry Anthony Klein went to the woods in the area where Abigail Williams and Liberty German's bodies were ultimately found. David Vito testified that Keegan Klein stated that when Jerry Anthony Klein returned to the vehicle, he had blood on him. Roland Purdy further testified that Keegan Klein admitted that they discarded a knife in a river when they were driving home. So I do believe it is possible that Keegan Klein is lying. I just don't think that it's likely. Why would he do that? Now, I can understand if somebody was responsible for the murders and then accusing their father, like, it wasn't me, it was my father, or I'm half responsible, but he really did, the heavy lifting. So now that we know that this is factual information, why the hell would Keegan Klein say that? I just don't understand. And we can sit here all day and talk about the DNA, but it's my belief that they don't have any DNA. And I believe it's because Richard Allen was cleaning off his DNA in the river. So from the outside looking in, it appears that the crime is pre-planned. They went down the hill because there is a water source there. I just don't know if Richard Allen did it alone or what.
Erroneous! Erroneous! Erroneous on both counts.
Oh, Lord.
Erroneous. Yeah. Could be Fig, but I don't know for sure. I mean, why is Keegan Klein saying that he participated in the murders? Was he lying? Yes. Why? I don't know. All I know is that folks who have been had their DNA taken, I don't think that they can be excluded, especially if they don't have DNA and the DNA is still possibly unknown. Hey, welcome in, Charlotte. We're going to get out of here in about 5 minutes, so I'm kind of breezing through here. Ooh, thank you, Zoe, hooking up a membership. The Mint 501, where is TK now? He's in Florida. Living it up. Yeah, and I'm not saying there's a whole lot there with Keegan Klein, but it is my opinion the girls were lured there, and we know that Anthony Schatz was communicating with the girls. Well, looks like Augie is the lucky winner. And to me, it appears that Abby is crossing the bridge when she doesn't want to. And she doesn't have to be convinced. Just her best friend has to be convinced to cross the bridge. And she's the one that's communicating with Anthony Schatz. She's the one that was targeted. It's her clothing that's found in the creek, even though we know now that the girls crossed the creek entirely before they were murdered. So why is the clothing going back to where they just came from? My opinion is to clean the DNA off of that. So I don't think anybody that's provided their DNA can now be excluded. Because if they don't have Richard Allen's DNA, which it sounds like they don't, I think that puts some other things back into play. Anna says, KK said investigators offered to make SA charges go away. I don't think they can. You can't take charges away from another crime. You can't sacrifice somebody else's justice for somebody else. Now they can make a deal with any charges that might be for Delphi, but you can't negotiate with somebody else's justice. It doesn't work that way. I don't know, Thin Mint. I just don't know. I just think that the girls were lured there. So I can't just throw Anthony Schatz and Keegan Klein off the table. That would be extremely reckless. Even though I want to, there's just certain things that won't allow me to. I'm not letting my biases control the way I look at this case anymore. Or other people's biases. Shitburgers, huh? Frederica says we'll know soon enough. Law enforcement knows more, of course, or Allen wouldn't have been arrested. Well, all they need to know is that he was there on the trails at the time of the murders and that the unspent bullet apparently matches his gun. And no discussion of DNA. If they had a DNA match, in my opinion, they would have said it right away. I don't think so, Augie. I think they believe that he was lying. I just don't understand. We have Keegan Klein saying that all these things about his father coming out of the woods, all muddy and bloody, they taking him into custody the same day they started the Wabash River search. We have this Anthony Schatz account reaching out to to Libby. We have Libby being what appears to be targeted. We have Richard Allen apologizing for the murder of Abby. The only victim that seems to be disrobed is Libby. And also, we have an issue with the DNA. And we have the target victim's clothing in the river, which appear to be maybe cleaned of DNA. With all of that, I'm reading, it tells me that this was a pre-planned murder and that the girls were lured there. And if they were lured there, maybe it was Anthony Schatz or somebody connected with that. To just dismiss that is something that I can do. And I'm okay with being wrong. I don't need to be right. But I'm not going to be that foolish. But I also know that Richard Allen doesn't need the Anthony Schatz account to stalk and lure Abby and Libby to that bridge. Everything can still be true without the Keegan Klein and the Anthony Schatz. And there's going to be a lot of information that investigators can't prove. And that doesn't mean that it's not so. I hope you saw my notes. What notes? Oh, you talking about Farmer? All right, guys. I think we're pretty much all caught up on the chat. If you guys need to reach me at all, sleuthintuition@gmail.com. If you're part of the replay crew, leave me a comment. Let me know what you think about today's live stream. Do they have DNA? And if so, would they hide it? If they have DNA, why is the defense putting in their leaked memo that they have no DNA? And if we now know that the girls crossed the creek or at least were attacked on the north side, why are Libby's clothing found back south in the water? What would be the purpose of that? Oh, let me take them from my concealed crime scene and throw them out in the open? That doesn't make any sense. The only thing that makes sense is I'm scrubbing off of my DNA off of this clothing. Later, Lulu. Thank you, Zoe. It's a good question, Lulu. Because it does appear that the bridge guy was smoking a cigarette, and he may have even spit something out while walking across the bridge right before confronting the girls. Thank you for that, Hathers. Good Farmer. Appreciate it. And remember, guys, there was a case in 2016 where Jerry Holman was the lead investigator. It's the David Kallenberger case. It happened shortly before Abby and Libby. And they have a witness who came forward and stated that he helped dispose of the body. Now, this person is a known felon. He's a drug addict. He's bomb threat B. Phillips. So he's not a credible witness, kind of like Keegan Klein. So unless you got something solid, unless you can show them where the body is, or if you can show them DNA evidence or give them something tangible, all you have is some lame loser telling a story, right? Until it's something more. And there has been no arrest made in the David Kallenberger case. Even though Jerry Holman knows exactly who did it, everyone that's responsible, and they have a witness very similar to a Keegan Klein type, a known scumbag. But without something tangible, there's nothing you can really do with that kind of a witness. They're not credible until they are. What's up, Tim Perry? All righty, guys. You enjoy the rest of your Saturday. And I'll see you guys again real soon. Thanks for hanging out. Like I said, if you need me, shoot me an email, sleuthintuition@gmail.com. And if you're part of the replay crew, let me know what you think about today's live stream. Don't forget to like and share the video. If you could, I'd appreciate it. Take care. Peace.